welcome back to Food Prep Guide. As part of this year's Pantry Challenge with Three Rivers Homestead, we discussed that we were going to show you different ways to use canned potatoes. I think it seems like, based on some Facebook groups I'm in and some forums I'm in, it seems like canned potatoes are like kind of pushed to the side and not used very much, which I completely understand because I did that for many years. But when we had the best potato harvest we've ever had last year, I needed to learn ways to eat them and prepare them that my family would really enjoy. So I learned a lot in all of that experimenting, and I wanted to share with you different ways that you can use canned potatoes. Now we're actually going to cook up three of those ways. But I don't want to assume that everyone watching this video has done all the things with canned potatoes. And so I don't want to overlook kind of the more obvious type things, just in case someone is watching this who is brand new to using and cooking with canned potatoes like on a regular basis. So the number one thing that comes to mind that I have used canned potatoes for is potato soup. It seems like a no-brainer because it's just kind of a natural part of potato soup, but even that is often made with fresh potatoes. It's delicious that way, but canned potatoes are really fantastic in potato soup, and they can make your prep time for that potato soup go a lot faster. You can swap out canned potatoes for the same 1-to-1 ratio in your normal potato recipe. The second thing that I think of with canned potatoes is potato salad. And that's another thing where you can save a lot of time in prep because those potatoes are already peeled for you, and a lot of times they're already chopped. You might need to do a little bit of a chopping before you work them into your potato salad, but still, you're going to save a lot of time in prep. The one thing that I would note if you're using canned potatoes for potato salad is that you do want to pat them dry thoroughly with paper towels, and you might want to do 2 or even 3 rounds of patting them dry thoroughly before moving forward with your potato salad recipe. So I hope that's helpful. Of course, the other thing is just tossing them into your soups and stews. Soups and stews, you can bulk them up and feed more bellies and satisfy more appetites with some starch ingredient like potatoes, and it can just really stretch a meal that way as well. I will often plop a can of potatoes into whatever soup or stew that I am making for that particular reason. Okay, so I want to show you 3 kind of unique ways of making canned potatoes that maybe aren't as obvious. This first one that we're going to cook together might be obvious. It's mashed potatoes, but I want to share a trick for making canned potatoes into mashed potatoes a lot better. So what I'm going to be using this year, or in this video, is the herbed potatoes that we grew and canned this year. If you see a lot of this, what looks like mashed potatoes, it just looks like one solid mass. It is not one solid mass in the jar. It's not safe to can mashed potatoes. That's just all the starch that you see. We have a whole video talking about potato starch and canning with potatoes and dealing with that starch, and I will link that down in the description box below. For the sake of this video, I really want to show you all the steps to using these 3 ways, but at the same time, I don't want to waste food. So what I'm going to do is I'm only going to be using half of a jar of potatoes for each of the recipes that I'm doing. Just know that if you try this recipe at home, you'll want to use a full quart-size jar of potatoes. If you're using canned potatoes from the store, you're going to want at least 2 cans, more than likely 3 cans, to make the recipes that we're going to be making today. But just to save on ingredients and being able to feed what my family can actually eat today so that the ingredients aren't wasted, I'm just going to go ahead and use half a jar for each of the recipes that we're trying. Okay, I've got my pot here. I've already been having it heated up while we are having this discussion. So the first thing that we need to do is that even though this is a mashed potato recipe and we are going to be adding liquid in the form of milk, we do still need to drain and rinse our potatoes before putting them into our pot. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of very slightly get these browned on the edges before I start adding in my liquid. So I have my heat on medium-low type heat, and I'm just going to cook them and let them just brown just a teeny tiny bit before I add the liquid. Okay, these have browned just slightly. before I even had time to think about it, I dumped the whole jar in. I meant to only do half. That's okay. So at this point, I used this quart jar that the potatoes came out of, and I just used it as your measuring cup for 1 cup of milk. I'm going to turn my heat down a little bit because we don't need it that high heat anymore. And at this point, if you would like to season your potatoes, you can season them however you want. I don't even need to season these because these are the herbed potatoes from the Ball canning book, and they are already flavored deliciously. So I'm just going to let these cook a little bit, and then I will show you the trick to making really nice mashed potatoes from canned. Okay, so I don't know if you can quite see here, but the starch from the potatoes is kind of working to thicken the milk for us, and we're at that stage where it's starting to get kind of thick and it's bubbling pretty constantly around all the edges, which is when we need to do the next step. I was just thinking, you know, we like our mashed potatoes really creamy. If you are someone who maybe doesn't like your mashed potatoes really creamy, it's starting to stick on the bottom. Let me lower the heat a little bit. You can get by with not adding any milk to it and just mashing up the potatoes as is. But if you really like creamy mashed potatoes and really want to get that type of consistency out of a canned potato, then this is what I recommend. So once we get to this point, here's the secret ingredient, potato flakes, the instant potato flakes. So these just serve to kind of bulk up the mashed potatoes and add more bulk to absorb the moisture, because the thing with canned potatoes is they're sitting in that can of liquid for who knows how long. I mean, it could be a year or two, and that whole time that it's sitting there, it's just absorbing that moisture, trapped in that moisture. And even though mashed potatoes are a very moist dish, this is a 1/4 cup and I put 2, so about 1/2 cup, but I just eyeball it. I'm going to do a little bit more. I'm going to stir it, let it cook down, and I'm just going to continue adding onion flakes until I get the consistency that I want. But I think that's the key to making mashed potatoes out of canned potatoes feel and taste a lot more with the same texture as if you took fresh potatoes and steamed them and mashed them yourself. So at this point, it is just adding in more potato flakes as you see fit. Excuse me. I'm going at this point to mash them up. Every now and then I will use an immersion blender instead. That just depends on what I feel like doing, what I feel like cleaning up or not cleaning up. But I'm just going to be using this potato masher for now. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat on low because I don't think they're quite done yet, but they are looking close, so I'm not going to turn the heat off just yet. But before I add more potato flakes, I'm going to go ahead and mash them so I can get a better idea of what kind of consistency I'm dealing with and see if we actually need more or not. And actually, they're looking really nice. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off, and I'm going to call it good. I'm not going to add any more instant potato flakes, and I'm just going to continue mashing until I get all of these chunks out. This smells so good. If y'all have not tried herbed potatoes, canning herbed potatoes, I highly recommend that. I don't know if I mentioned, but we do have a video of where we canned these herbed potatoes together on camera, so I will link that in the description box below as well. One of my absolute favorite ways to put up potatoes. In fact, the only other way we put them up is dehydrating. This is the only canned potato recipe that we use, because it's just so good. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Get a spoon and bring it up close so you can see how it's looking. Okay, mashed potatoes from canned potatoes using our instant potato flake tip to make them nice and thick, because canned mashed potatoes do have a tendency to be runny. you can get them still creamy with the milk, but then still get them nice and thick, the right texture with a little bit of instant potato flakes. Okay, on to recipe number 2. Okay, so this next recipe comes together pretty quickly, so I'm going to go ahead and get my skillet up a little bit on higher heat than we had earlier while we kind of talk about this. So the next recipe is potato pancakes, potato cakes, fried potato pancakes. I mean, it goes by a lot of different ways. We typically refer to them as potato patties. That's usually when I'm doing my meal plan and kind of thinking about side dishes, I kind of tend to think of them as potato patties. But the first thing to do is get your skillet nice and hot and go ahead and use whatever kind of fat that you want to use for frying the patties. We're trying to conserve butter as much as possible this year because butter prices have just been through the roof. But this is also the first year that I got my hands on some lard and or pork fat and was able to render it into lard, which I'm super excited about. We've been using it and we really enjoy it, and I've noticed that it has significantly saved or cut down on how quickly we move through butter. But you can certainly use butter for this. You can use like some kind of vegetable oil or anything like that for this. Anything that you would use to do your typical frying in. So let's see, it's not quite liquid enough to pour. Thought it would be. But it's negative degrees outside, so a rarity here in the South. Normally this is liquid enough to just pour out, but with how cold it is, it kind of solidified a bit. So we don't need a whole lot for this, especially considering I'm going to do my best to remember to only use half of a quart this time. Okay, I think that's going to be good. So the first step is to drain our potatoes just like we did last time, but we do need to pat them dry thoroughly with paper towels after we drain them. So I'm going to get that done real quick. Okay, so I've got a plate here with a double folded over paper towel. And then I'm just going to get some more paper towels and just start patting them dry. Any kind of dish where you're going to be frying or roasting the potatoes, you want to get them as dry as possible. And I think that's typically why canned potatoes aren't usually used for those types of recipes, because of the moisture that they hold. But again, we're going to use potato flakes to take care of that for us. Okay, good enough. Get that transferred into this bowl here. Okay. Now I'm just going to use a fork to start mashing this. I might get my potato masher still. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and get my potato masher that I just had. Found it. Okay. So I'm just going to start mashing those. Okay, I'm going to add in 1 egg. And I'm going to sprinkle in just a little bit of potatoes. This is one of those recipes I really don't measure much. Whoops, bay leaves. I store bay leaves in my potatoes to keep them nice and fresh and pest-free. Okay. Now we're going to get that egg and those potato flakes all mixed together. And once that egg is all incorporated, I'm happy with how much the potatoes are mashed. I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of flour, sometimes a couple tablespoons. It kind of depends. I'm looking at how moist the potatoes still are, and that's going to depend on how much flour I add. And once you get this flour all mixed in, this is the point that you would start to season them however you want them. If for whatever reason I wasn't using herb potatoes, I would be using garlic powder, onion powder, salt, and pepper. Whoo, that smoke from the, oh goodness. I didn't realize the camera was picking it up so much. Well, that's okay. Happens all the time when I'm frying. Okay, so that is getting nice and hot, and that's what we want. We want this to get nice and hot. And at this point, I'm not seasoning, like I said, because the herb potatoes are already seasoned very, very well. So at this point, I'm just going to start putting up my patties and making them into a flat, round pancake type shape. For the sake of not burning my fingers, I'm actually just going to make more of like a ball shape, and then I'll use the spatula to flatten them down. And since the oil is so hot already, I'm not going to put them into the skillet one by one. I want them to all go into the skillet at the same time. So I'm just going to make little balls and put them to the side in this bowl, because they're going to cook up really fast once we get them in that oil. This is a fantastic side dish for practically any meal. We use it a lot when we're cooking with venison, but it also works really well alongside like some pork chops. Okay. Okay, let me rinse my hands off real quick. Toss that oil around a little bit. I want to make sure it's all coated over the skillet. I'm going to turn down the heat just a tad, and into the skillet they go. And then I will flatten them down into patties with this spatula. These only need to cook for about 2 minutes on each side, so this goes really fast. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and get my plate ready to put these on. And I like to line the plate with paper towels just to soak up any excess moisture and grease. Let this cook just a tad longer. Okay, plate these up. Okay, and there we have our potato patties, potato pancakes, potato cakes, whatever you want to call them. A great side dish with any kind of meal. You know what I did? I used the whole quart again. Oh, okay, so I said that I would show you the third way, which is roasting potatoes, but one of my, like, I don't know if you would call it a pet peeve, but I just cannot stand wasting food. And I've already cooked up a big batch of mashed potatoes and a big batch of potato patties. So I am not going to actually cook up the roasted potatoes, but I do want to talk to you and show you how to do it, or tell you about how to do it. So one of the things about roasting potatoes is I don't think canned potatoes and roasted potatoes link together in most people's minds. I know it didn't in mine for a long time, but as long as you do that patting it dry approach and pat it dry really good, probably 2, maybe even 3 times, you can roast them. Now they're not going to get as crispy, they're not going to have like this hard outer brown layer of crispiness just like fresh potatoes would if you were to roast them, but they absolutely do get crispy on the outside, and you can get them a little bit brown. And it's just a great way to use up canned potatoes in a way that you may not have thought of before. So you can use whatever roasting seasonings that you would typically be using. We love paprika and parsley for our roasted potatoes, in addition to whatever seasonings are already in the herb potatoes, which, by the way, is thyme, rosemary, salt, and pepper. So I would drain these just like I did for the previous 2 videos, and I would pat them dry really, really well. Lay them out, or actually like, put them in a bowl, drizzle just a little bit of olive oil, not much at all. Sometimes I'll even use the spray kind, where I just spray like a quick little squirt over the potatoes. Go ahead and season them however you want. Spread them out on your baking sheets and roast them in the oven for about 30 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. At that point, after the 30 minutes, they're still not done. You'll want to take them out and get like a spatula or something and just stir them around, get them, kind of flip them to the other side, you know, that kind of thing. And then you're going to raise your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Put them back in the oven and cook them for 25 to 30 minutes. Now that second cook time, you'll need to watch them really closely and make sure that they don't burn, because it is cooking at 450 degrees, which is pretty high. But that 450 degrees is really what it takes to get the crispy layer on canned potatoes. So that's why we do 2 kind of rounds of cooking, and the second round at the higher temperature. And you can get crispy canned potatoes that way as a roasted potato side dish, which is of course just really simple, really easy to throw in the oven while you're prepping your main course. Okay, y'all, I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you plenty of ideas for cooking with canned potatoes. They really are a pantry staple. That's all for today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.